Hello, Roger Hill of Wuthering Heights. Well, I have this in my Facebook inbox today, and now that I've got all the storms out of the way and I'm not completely tied up with operational meteorology forecasting, I can debunk this one fella here. His name is Patrick Moore, and we'll go over as to why he's some sort of expert on climate. He's gotten a lot of views, you might notice. 364,000. Amazing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put him up against Jim White, Dr. Jim White, and we're going to try to debunk what Patrick Moore says, and I'm going to use Jim White, who is a real climate scientist, been in the field, but he doesn't seem to get the same number of views.
The only constant is change. That's true about life, and it's true about the climate. The climate has been constantly changing since the Earth was formed 4.6 billion years ago. For example, in just the past 2,000 years, we have seen the Roman warm period, when it was warmer than today. Then came the cooler Dark Ages, followed by the medieval warm period, when it was at least as warm as today. Then we had the Little Ice Age that drove the Vikings out of Greenland, and most recently, a gradual 300-year warming to the present day. That's a lot of changes, and of course, not one of them was caused by humans.
So what Mr. Moore just reported on, which is all true, climate's always been changing, and it will always change. This is called natural variation, and it's always at work, is all true. Everything he reported was also based off of Europe, Eurocentric, and what has driven those changes primarily has been the changes in the Gulf Stream and the thermohaline circulation, Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, which supplies a lot of changes, and it has a lot to do with the Little Ice Age, which was, by the way, not planetary, but local to the North Atlantic. It sucks when your local weather is not behaving exactly as the rest of the planet.
Very much. Thanks, Dave. Welcome, everybody. Hello. I don't normally get to speak midweek. Normally it's like, the last time slot. So I don't know really how to handle the limelight here, the prime time slot you've given me, other than to dive right in. Steal this and take it and do whatever you want. And it goes like this. So I do this for a while. Thanks for the warning. And so what I'm doing here is I'm demonstrating for you the two primary types of behavior. And there are two primary types of behavior. One of them is we understand as physics, right? So every time I drop this pen's going to fall, right? And I can drop this pen all day, every day, for the rest of my life, and it will fall every time. It will never stop in mid-fall and just hang up. And the reason for that has to do with the fact that the universe, as we understand it, is governed by physical laws, and those physical laws are not breakable. Right? So gravity is something that happens all the time. And as scientists, we understand that. But the average person on the street, this is okay. Because the other behavior that I'm demonstrating here is free will. Right? I can stop doing this whenever I want. I can stop being annoying whenever I want. I choose, I am choosing not to do that.
Anytime, Tim.
Anytime.
All right, I'll talk.
So this is something that I think that we get confused, and I do an entire lecture on this, but we get confused about this sometimes. We get confused about those things that we can control, like free will, like stopping this pen dropping exercise, and those things that we cannot control. So we cannot, for example, control gravity. We cannot control the fact that molecules vibrate, and if molecules vibrate and you give them the right energy, they'll absorb that energy. And of course, I'm talking about, greenhouse gases absorbing energy in the atmosphere. That's going to happen regardless of what we do, regardless of what we say, regardless of what we believe, regardless of what we would like to see happen. And that's an important distinction. And I think many people who don't understand science get those things confused. They get them mixed up. What are the things that I can believe in, that I can actually have free will about, and what are those things that I really don't even get an opportunity to believe in, because they're going to happen whether I believe in them or not. Okay? So I just wanted to share that with you, in case you wanted to annoy, your viewers at any time with the pen dropping exercise, to talk about the two fundamental types of behavior.
Meaning that vast sheets of ice covered a good part of the globe, interrupted by brief interglacial periods. We are in one of those periods right now. This is all part of the Pleistocene Ice Age.
What we're in is the Holocene epoch to be more accurate, and actually we've graduated into the Anthropocene, which is affected by humans. The Holocene epoch has been happening since about 11,700 years ago, since the last ice age, and it's what we call the interglacial. Now, there's been other climate shifts, the Little Ice Age between 1200 and 1700 AD, but in general, the Holocene has been a relatively warm period, a very constant period since the last ice age, allowing humans to prosper and really allowing for civilization.
So then what about carbon dioxide, the great villain of the global warming alarmists? Where does that fit into this picture? Not as neatly as you might think. Temperatures and carbon dioxide levels do not show a strong correlation. In fact, over very long time spans, periods of hundreds of millions of years, they are often completely out of sync with one another.
That, my friends, is temperature and CO2. You will note that the correlation is pretty fantastic.
Factors such as the shape and size of the Earth's elliptical orbit around the Sun, activity from the Sun, and the amount of wobble or tilt in the Earth's axis, among many others. Even the relatively short 300-year period from the peak of the Little Ice Age to the present has not been steady. The latest trend has been a warming one, but it began nearly a century before there were significant carbon dioxide emissions from burning fossil fuels. And there has been no significant warming trend in the 21st century.
Carl.
Chris, it is simply not true that there is disagreement amongst scientists, and there have been multiple studies that have shown that scientists agree, 97% of climate scientists agree that climate change is a man-made phenomenon. If you look at the rise in temperatures, you can see that they are concordant. They fit very well with the rise in CO2 that has occurred since the advent of the industrial age. Now, one could argue that perhaps that is just a coincidence. Well, let's take a look at another graph. This is showing us temperature reconstructions going back to the Ice Age from sediment and ice cores, and we see that coming out of the Ice Age there's a very gradual slope there, and so that is natural climate change, takes place very, very slowly over thousands and thousands of years, and then at the very end of this we see a sharp jump right in there, and that is not natural. That is man-made climate change.
Contrary to media headlines, the trend over the past couple of decades has been essentially flat.
So the skeptics or climate deniers love to point this out. They love to say that over the last couple of decades there's been a hiatus, a pause. Well, if you take the 1998-99 El Nino and you shoot a line before last year's El Nino, you'll get a pause. And so they cherry pick that. You have to do a considerable amount of, let's put it this way, well, this is what you end up having to do. You have to do this kind of thing here. See, there's no warming. Come on. Yes, there is. So back to this other graphic, there is warming, as we can see, and it does come in natural variation, and that's always going to be with us. So let's break it on down. A lot of them, up to back a couple, 3 years ago, were using the solar cycle as the main ingredient here, and as you see, it's really not that much of a change. The solar cycles add a little bit, really not that much, and if anything, we're cooling anyway. We're coming out of solar cycle 24, so or as they say in Russia, niet. Well, it's those dang volcanoes that keep going off. They cause all this global warming. It's true that they do raise the CO2, but not compared to what man does. And if anything, it goes into the stratosphere and cools the planet. Doesn't warm the planet, cools the planet. Internal variability, and then we have anthropogenic warming, and that's the man-made portion of that. And what you can see is that the temperature is going up because we're raising the amount of carbon dioxide that interacts with sunshine and causes heating. We've known about this since the 1800s. This is not breaking news. It did not start with Al Gore. It is not political, nor is volcanoes political, nor are asteroids political, nor are other planets that have life like Earth political. They are just facts.
Meanwhile, human-caused CO2 emissions are higher than ever. About 25% of all the CO2 emissions from human sources have occurred during this period of no net warming.
Scientists, and there have been multiple studies that have shown that scientists agree, 97% of climate scientists agree that climate change is a man-made phenomenon. If you look at the rise in temperatures, you can see that they are concordant. They fit very well with
1 degree C of warming. Why worry about such a small change? And this is one of the more important questions, I think, and I really like it when I get this question because I think it shows that people are thinking about this. 1 degree, is that really significant? Is that really important? All right, so let's take a look at what 1 degree means. So this is the last 2,000 years or so. You see the various temperature records we have here. The increase in temperature that we're talking about is here on the right. It's about 1 degree C. You see that there's quite a bit of variability over time. So over the last 2,000 years, 1 degree is really not altogether that significant in terms of the various changes that have occurred. It is significant, but it's not hugely significant. If you take this back farther in time, this is 400,000 years. This is now the Vostok ice core going from today back 400,000 years, and you see a temperature record there on the right. So 0 would be today's average temperature. So we think that during the various interglacial periods that existed, about 120,000, 140,000, 240,000, etc., roughly every 100,000 years in the past, we think it was warmer during many of those, including the last one. And we have fairly good records accessing the last interglacial period. We think it was about 2 degrees C warmer at that time. Okay? Now that's helpful because I'll loop back and I'll show you what are some of the key metrics in terms of how the planet looked with 2 degrees of warming. I would point out, by the way, so 2 degrees is not a number that I'm just pulling out of my head.